I'm Chance Dorland, and this is the Spurs Insider, a new weekly NBA podcast from ExpressNews.com, brought to you each week by North Park Mazda, the #1 Mazda dealer in Texas last month. And of course, I'm joined now by my weekly partner in crime, San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young, reporting this week from the road. We got you on the phone. How you doing, Jabari?
Hey, man, I'm done. The Rodeo road trip is over, and now the Spurs get to go back home. I get to go back home, so I'm excited about that.
That's right. Back to San Antonio after not the greatest road trip, but a great victory at the front and an even greater victory at the end, as you reported in a video that I was listening to a few days ago. We're going to talk about, of course, the road trip and a few other things. But of course, first, you had this great interview with Gregg Popovich last week. I guess a group interview. There were some other people there regarding Kawhi Leonard, and he gave you a mouthful. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, that's old news, because, as I reported a while ago, Kawhi Leonard is back in San Antonio. He got back Sunday night, and Gregg Popovich he came out last week and said that he'd be surprised if Kawhi steps back on the court, but, it was all nonsense. Because at the end of the day, even though Gregg Popovich would be surprised, he never said that he would be out for the season. And that's the words I was looking for. And I straight up asked Gregg Popovich, hey, are you ready to list Kawhi Leonard out for the season? And he says, no, I'm ready to say what I just said. So that told me right then and there that Kawhi Leonard would not be out for the season, that Gregg Popovich would be surprised if Kawhi Leonard comes back. But the whole world would be, would love that surprise, especially in San Antonio. But he's back in the area, and he will try again he wanted to get a few practice days with the team, and now on the verge of trying to get back again. Like I said, reported a week ago, that first or second week of March is when he's trying to get back. And I think, fully, I'm looking at maybe next week, around that Monday game with the Spurs play before we tape another podcast, Chance. That he'll be back in the lineup, and if not then, like I said, between that first and second week is that was always the target. That was always the target date, for him to get back on the court. So, it was just interesting, that the Spurs would take that route of saying that they'd be surprised if he came back on the court, knowing full and well that Kawhi Leonard had intentions of getting back. So, at the end of the day, the goal of getting number 2 back on the court looks, more and more likely. And now they can really fully engage and plan a run that they, thought that they were going to plan a while ago. And again, they have a much better squad with Kawhi Leonard on the court than him being off of the court. And I think if you use this entire month of March, or at least most of it, to get him back, to get him gelling, to get him in rhythm with LaMarcus Aldridge, with, DeJounte Murray, with that starting lineup, I think it just makes the Spurs look more and more better heading to the playoffs.
So you really think he's coming back? If that's the case, that's great. You just probably relieved a lot of people. There's like a collective out there. But why give that answer? Why sort of rile people up? Were they just making sure they covered everything that could possibly happen? Did something happen that made them think, oh, wow, maybe he won't come back, that they wanted to give this answer out there?
It's a matter of frustration, Chance. That's what it is, a matter of frustration on the team's part, because they want to see their franchise player back on the court, and they fully thought that he would be back and ready to go right after the All-Star break, or against the Denver Nuggets, as a matter of fact. They wanted him back on the court for the last 2 games of Rodeo road trip, against the Denver Nuggets and against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They thinking, hey, listen, you've had enough time. We shut you down in Atlanta. You had the full All-Star break. Now can you come back on the court? And Kawhi Leonard wasn't ready. And again, people got to respect the man's decision when it comes to his body and him doing what he needs to do. And that is when a guy wants to get back on the court, when he feels comfortable getting back on the court, and that's the important thing. The team can clear you all they want. Team doctors that work for the team can clear you all they want. But when it comes to you getting back on the court, when it comes to you feeling the way that you feel, making sure that you and your mind know, hey, listen, I feel good. My body feels good. That's all that matters. That's it. It's what Kawhi Leonard feels. And that's what I've been trying to tell and explain to people all along. You don't give a damn what the Spurs say, and what the Spurs say they can clear him all they want. What matters is the player and how he feels, how his body feels. Nobody knows what's going on with Kawhi Leonard's body except for Kawhi Leonard. Nobody knows what he feels except for Kawhi Leonard. Nobody knows the pain that he could be in except for Kawhi Leonard. He can do his best to explain that. But if you're not listening, then what difference does it make? So again, it had to do with him getting himself back when he felt good, when his body felt good. Kawhi Leonard never wanted to give up on the Spurs. Kawhi Leonard ain't thinking about not playing. He wants to play. That's what this guy does for a living. He plays basketball, and you can't find a more competitive guy on that roster than a guy like Kawhi Leonard who wants to play all the time. I mean, this is a guy who plays maximum effort back and forth on the court, both ends of the court. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. They want him to play, and he wants to play. But it came down to the fact of Kawhi Leonard will get back on the court and play when he felt like he was confident enough to do so. And that confidence now is increasing, and it looks more and more likely, like I said before, as I reported first, because I'm not letting anybody take any credit away from the San Antonio Express News. I've said all along that Kawhi Leonard was aiming around March, that first week of March, that second week of March, to come back. The national outlets can report it, and all of a sudden it's an uproar. But the San Antonio Express News had that first, that he was anticipating on getting back the first week of March and the week of March to getting back and trying to make a run for the playoffs. So again, it looks more and more likely, and you just hope that there's no setbacks between now and then.
So all that being the case, no argument from me. Perhaps the final kind of icing on the cake here on this topic. Did Kawhi Leonard perhaps maybe, if you don't want to say made a mistake, did he miss an opportunity to perhaps give out more information to address this so that there wasn't so much drama, so that people weren't kind of scratching their head? There's certainly been a lack of information, and when you didn't get such a definitive answer from Gregg Popovich, should Kawhi have said something, or should the team have had given more information?
No, I'm not putting that on Kawhi Leonard. I'm putting that on the San Antonio Spurs, because the San Antonio Spurs had an obligation to their fan base to make Kawhi Leonard available when he was in town. When Kawhi Leonard knew when he went out, and they knew that he was going to miss a significant amount of time, the NBA rules say that the team had to make the player available to the media to talk, and that way we could have asked Kawhi Leonard himself. It's not up for Kawhi Leonard to go behind any scenes or behind any doors or Twitter or Facebook and make that statement. No, the team had an obligation to make sure that they made him available. They failed that obligation. They failed their fan base. It wasn't Kawhi Leonard, because Kawhi Leonard, if the Spurs went to Kawhi Leonard and say, hey, we got to make you available to the media, he's not going to say no. That's his duty. But they didn't do that, because they have a history, and it's the history that players respect of protecting the player. And so I'll put that on the team. Okay, the San Antonio Express News is one of the media outlets that have requested Kawhi Leonard to talk, requested him to get interviewed, and the team continuously dragged their feet and did not make him available in the time frame that they were supposed to make him available. So that's not on Kawhi Leonard. That's on the San Antonio Spurs. And I tell you right now, with all due respect, if you want to say that somebody failed in this whole situation, and as far as making sure that the narrative was correct and making sure that the narrative and that the player had an opportunity to talk, the team failed. Okay, the team really, I give them an F. Okay, in this whole situation, because they had a duty. Okay, you protect your player. B, you also make sure that you abide by NBA rules to make the player available when that player was not on the court or did not practice in a certain amount of time. And then that player can speak for himself, and the Spurs don't have to say anything. The Spurs are not put on that. They're not blamed, okay, for anything. But right now, I sit up here and I say that the team did not do what they were supposed to do and make the player available during the time that they were supposed to make him available. And when you don't do that, okay, then you have all these stories are circling out in the media. Then you have all these narratives behind the scenes. Oh, is Kawhi Leonard happy? Is the Spurs, or is the relationship happy? No, you allow the player to come out and speak for himself. The coach is there. He's speaking. Why not the player? Why can't the player speak as well? Okay, if that was the case, make the player available so that way we can ask the player himself what's going on. Are you happy? Are you hurt? Do you look forward to having a return? The team didn't do that, and so this is what happens when you don't go and abide by league rules. Like, again, I said league rules. They were supposed to make him available. They didn't make him available, and now the message got spun under control.
I'm looking forward to when you bring all this up to Gregg Popovich the next time you talk to him. It'll be a really great interview.
I don't have to bring it up to Gregg Popovich. He knows. You know what I mean? He knows. The Spurs are going to do whatever they want to do. They've been doing whatever they want to do for years and years and years. They're going to do whatever they want to do. And a lot of times people can't, you really can't contest or say anything because why? They got 5 championships. I mean, they have done a good job at running the program that they want to run. But at the same time, it's a new age. It's 2018. It's no longer the years of Tim Duncan and when the Big Three was at its height. It's a brand new era. And I don't think they've adapted to this new era of basketball. Well, not basketball on the court, but I don't think they've adapted to this new era of social media and of when it comes to their business getting out in the street, okay? Because they haven't been used to this. Tim Duncan, this never happened on his watch. But it's a whole different era now, and they got to adapt to that. One of the things that you adapt to that, one way to do that is by abiding by the league rules and making players available when they're supposed to be made available. That way, the team doesn't get put in this light. That way, the player gets to be asked these questions, and we get to take it from the player's mouth and not a whole bunch of backstories. But again, like I said before, they've been successful. Nobody can knock that. Gregg Popovich arguably the greatest coach that ever coached a game. But at the same time, they have to do a better job at making sure that messages get put out the correct way and that players get made available so that all this nonsense doesn't happen.
Yeah, it certainly would have been a completely different narrative if that had been the case. Yeah, maybe they need to hire a new PR person over there. But all right, new topic, Jabari.
I'm not going to say that. Listen, I know the PR the people.
You're really defending the guy, and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. The way you described it, everything makes perfect sense. Obviously, we're going to talk about this more, and hopefully those dates that you're talking about, we're going to see the player back in action, franchise player, of course. So you talked about at the top of the podcast, doing a little bit of traveling. We have you on the phone this time around. Rodeo road trip. The Spurs finished 2-4. Let's get your thoughts on that trip. I believe in the past you predicted a 4-2 run, so quite disappointing. But as I mentioned earlier, the victories before and victories at the beginning and the end, especially that really nice one against the Cavaliers.
Man, you wasn't supposed to bring up that I said 4-2, man. You're supposed to sweep that under the rug, man. Come on, man.
I take notes during these podcasts, man.
I said 4-2. I fully expected them to lose to the Cavs and maybe lose to the Warriors. I mean, no, they were going to lose to the Warriors, but you didn't expect them to lose to the Jazz. You didn't expect them to lose to the Denver Nuggets, not once but twice on Denver's home court. And so, hindsight couldn't have. I didn't predict that LaMarcus Aldridge wouldn't play before the All-Star break, and that Mondo Joe Danny Green would get sick and mess up their lineup a little bit. And they lose to Denver to open back up the post All-Star break. So I think, you're 4-2, I thought, but I tell you what, man, for them to go, 2-4, which was the opposite, I gotta say something. That win over the Cleveland Cavaliers was really interesting. It really was. It was a next man up approach that they had. And, DeJounte Murray, I thought, said it beautifully after the game. They've been playing by that next man up approach all along. Here it is. You don't have Danny Green against the Denver Nuggets. You took them to the distance. It was a good game. A lot of fouls being called. We're not going to get into that, late. But that was a winnable game that you could have probably won. And then against the Cleveland Cavaliers, you don't have Manu Ginobili. You go into LeBron James's home. Have a horrible second quarter for the most part. You shoot 3 of 19, and the Cavs look like they're running away with this thing. But you cut it and only take a 3-point deficit into halftime, and then the second half, you outscored them about 61-40 something. So that was an impressive win because the Spurs defense showed up in the second half specifically. They cut down the errors. They executed the way that they were supposed to execute. Their energy was there. The hustle was there. DeJounte Murray was fabulous in the second half of them. He had a game high 4 steals, team high 9 rebounds. LaMarcus Aldridge hit shots. They went and attacked with LaMarcus and Pau Gasol. They used their size in the second half. And that was just a team that, and you could just tell by the way Gregg Popovich was coaching that game, they wanted it more. And he knew the way he was coaching. I mean, you could tell they wanted that game. They needed that game. You couldn't come back home, losing 5 straight. You know what I mean? And so that was a very interesting win. And this is one of those wins where you say, you know what? Let's start from this win on out. and see how the Spurs, and again, with Kawhi Leonard on the verge of returning, let's start from this win on out and see how they perform, because this win is huge. And like I said before, I thought that the game that they played was it was phenomenal, man. It really was. It was just a great win for that team on the road to close out the Rodeo road trip. And now you come back home with some confidence, with a little bit of mojo, knowing that the 16 Rodeo trip is behind us. Now we can concentrate on trying to streak some wins together before you got to go back on the road for a massive, a 3-game road trip. That's going to be huge against the Golden State Warriors, against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then closing it out against the Houston Rockets. That to me, like I said, that win over Cleveland can be a defining moment in the season, even though it's this late, and we'll wait to see. But that, to me, that win was huge. That was huge. And Danny Green, I said it was the best win of 2018. That's what I think. Danny Green says no, it was the best win of February, the entire month of February. I think he's right. Although I think, again, since the clock strikes to 2018, Spurs have been up and down. That win against the Cleveland Cavaliers could be, what changes things for them.
You mentioned LaMarcus Aldridge, great performance. Can he keep up that all-star performance now that the break is over? And if not, then what for the Spurs?
Well, he has to. He has to. And he's been in these situations before when he was in Portland and he's had all-star years. The Spurs need him to keep it up plus more. I mean, because remember something, you could possibly be getting back Kawhi Leonard, and if everything goes well, he gets back on the court, right? LaMarcus Aldridge and Kawhi Leonard need to gel if the Spurs plan on making a serious run. Okay, that much is said. They need that. Okay, they need LaMarcus to be at the All-Star level, because Kawhi Leonard will not get back on the court. He's not going to be 100%, not right away, right? You got to get his legs on him. He's going to take a little bit to get himself back again. I mean, this is a guy who's missed a couple of weeks of basketball. You don't just get back on the court, drop 30, 40 points. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a few games of him stringing it together. And LaMarcus is still going to be needed. He's still, the Spurs are still going to have to ride his back. And though he has help now, you would think that it becomes easier because Rudy Gay is getting back in the rhythm, right? And then Kawhi Leonard comes back, he gets back in the rhythm. Manu Ginobili, gets back on the court after missing a game. Danny Green, who played phenomenal against the Cleveland Cavaliers, is getting his rhythm, back. So it should be easier, but they want to need him, and he's going to have to continue being the guy if they plan on, making a serious run. Now that the playoffs are upon us, or about a month and a half, a little bit over a month away. They're going to need him, and so he has to keep it up. And hopefully the Spurs do a good job at managing him and making sure that they don't wear him out, because getting through the month of March is going to be its own task. But once you complete that task, then the real action starts in April when the playoffs roll around. And LaMarcus Aldridge you cannot afford to have a bad LaMarcus Aldridge when the playoffs roll around. You need the LaMarcus Aldridge that's played the type of basketball he's played up until this point. You need that plus some in April when the playoffs roll around, if you plan on challenging to get out of the Western Conference.
All right, man. Time will tell. Looking forward to that. We'll obviously keep talking about that impending playoff talk here in a bit. But time now for the fans Q&A session. Questions listeners and readers submitted via our Spurs Nation Facebook and Twitter page. Got 2 of them for you this week on the road, Jabari. So first one, just one question. Do you think the Spurs can win a championship with the existing roster, which is Kawhi-less? Yes or no?
No, without Kawhi Leonard, you're not winning a championship. And that's no disrespect to those guys that they have. They played their behinds off. The young guys have been phenomenal. LaMarcus Aldridge, that we just mentioned, has been great. But, I'm not going to lie to people and think and try to give people hope. I don't think so. I mean, could they do it? Anybody. Anything could be done. Okay, especially if other teams start to endure some injuries like the Spurs have endured all year. But, no, I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like they'll be missing a lot of firepower. Kawhi Leonard brings that much to the table, defensively and offensively. Against a team like Denver, I watched them the other night, and I looked at our columnist Mike Finger, and I said, if the Spurs had to match up with the Denver Nuggets in the first round, I mean, I would think that they would win, but it's going to be a tough one because they have a lot of athletic wings, athletic guys on the wing, guards and small forwards who can really give the Spurs trouble. At that point, your best perimeter defender is Danny Green. He can't stop everybody. You need somebody that's going to disrupt that. And Kawhi Leonard is the guy. Denver is they are a really young, explosive team. And the Spurs saw that firsthand. And so, you need a guy like Kawhi Leonard to stop that. You got to play a team like the Portland Trailblazers, the same deal. Damian Lillard, C.J. McCollum, they give the Spurs fits. You need a guy like Kawhi Leonard to disrupt that. Without Kawhi Leonard, you might get out of the first round out of due respect, because I respect Gregg Popovich that much and the players that much. But that second round, that's where I think it ends without Kawhi Leonard. If Kawhi Leonard's on the court, I think you have a chance to go to the Western Conference Final and really challenge the Warriors. But without him, second round team, at best, first round, no surprise if you get eliminated there too. And again, no disrespect to the players that they have. It's just that they'd be lacking a lot of firepower at that point.
This next one's really interesting. So put on that thinking cap, Jabari. Looking into the future, when Pop actually retires, how would you feel the Spurs culture and style would or would not change with each of the current head coach possibilities? Thanks in advance. Love the insight that you bring. That's a thinker.
Well, first of all, I saw that question come in. I think the question, the person who asked me the question, I really do. I've always thought about who was going to take over. First of all, I think the culture, people will respect the culture, the history of it. But the culture is already, we've witnessed right now what's going on with the culture. I mean, the culture right now is, it's always going to be that San Antonio way, right? They're always going to try to do the best to protect their players, to protect their message, to protect what they're doing behind the scenes, right? But without Tim Duncan there, I mean, that was a guy who kept everything in line. When players came to San Antonio, Tim was the man. After Dave Robinson, those guys left, Tim Duncan was the guy, right? And so everybody fell in line because Tim Duncan was that man. He kept everybody in line. He kept, this was his team. Gregg Popovich, RCB, did a very good job at establishing the Spurs and helping establish the Spurs into what they are today. But I just think that as more young players come into the league and more, young players have their way of doing things as far as, with family and friends and empowering their family and friends to help navigate their career, that affects culture because the Spurs lose control over things. They don't have as much control as they used to because it's a different era. And that's not to say that their culture would be bad all of a sudden. It just would be different. It wouldn't be that same culture like Tim Duncan established and then Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili help, run and Sean Elliott and those guys. You know what I mean? Like, it's just different. It'll be different. You know what I mean? And so once Gregg Popovich leaves, I think that Ettore Messina, who is a very, fine head coach, especially, has established his record overseas, is phenomenal. I think he's a good guy. I think he would be next in line, right? I mean, as far as continuing that way, but it'd be different. It would be. Ettore Messina is not Gregg Popovich, and we can't expect that to be the case. He's not as fire as Gregg Popovich. I don't think it's, he doesn't have that my way or the highway type attitude as Gregg Popovich. I think he'd be more open and maybe, just a little bit different, So as the era that once was, as you start to see guys leave, guys like, Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, right? How long do they have left? And then obviously Gregg Popovich, I think you'll start to see a shift in the way the Spurs do things. And that shift, you would hope, is a good shift, but it wouldn't be the same as it used to be. That culture that people are identifying is long gone because Tim Duncan is not there anymore. Gregg Popovich is still yes, and you got to respect a fine head coach like himself. But coaches can't be captains. They can't be team leaders. Coaches can coach. They can be at the helm and everything like that. But you need people within the locker room, players within the locker room to be able to police themselves. And you need one guy. You need a voice. You need or two voices to come and say, "Hey, this is how we're going to do things." You need those captains. You need those guys in the locker room. Players got to be players. You got to let them police themselves as well. Gregg Popovich can't do it all, and so I think it'll be different. You know what I mean? The culture will be completely different than what it is. And I think you're seeing that shift happen firsthand. Just look at, the saga involving Kawhi Leonard and to find that out. Look at the saga with Jonathan Simmons last summer. You know what I mean? The Spurs were in the middle of that. Look at the saga involving LaMarcus Aldridge about him wanting to be traded and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And before they finally hashed it out, you slowly see that the shift is different now. It's not what it once was. You know what I mean? And I think the Spurs they better adapt to it. and they better adapt to it fast. Otherwise, it's going to be some trouble.
San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young joining me this week from the road. Jabari, before you get back, avoid those spaghetti dinners.
I don't eat spaghetti. I don't really eat spaghetti, man.
That's a good policy. If only the Spurs had a similar policy, you might have had a better game.
Well, Danny Green, right? I make my own spaghetti when I do it, man. I don't really eat meat like that anymore.
He's cooking in those hotel rooms.
Yeah, but thankful he got healthy, because that was a nasty one. When he told me he had it, I was like, I stayed away from him. I kind of walked away. I don't think it's contagious. Look, man, I don't want to take no chances.
Backing away.
I don't want to take any. I don't know what you got. I don't want to take no chances. The last thing, I don't know if anybody's ever been on an airplane before. Let me tell you something. Being on an airplane with an upset stomach, that is definitely not the way to travel. Okay, definitely not the way. So, but thankfully he got that out of the system, man. I'm sure we've all been the victim of food poisoning before. Those are definitely not no fun.
Oh yeah, I cannot imagine doing a physical job let alone just being a human being, but having to be out on the court. So a good decision.
Right.
All right, Jabari, great to talk with you this week. Wrapped everything up, and you'll of course be joining me next week for another edition of the Spurs Insider. Take care and travel safe.
Appreciate it, Chance. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you.
And, of course, thanks again to San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young for joining me for today's episode of the Spurs Insider, a new weekly NBA podcast from expressnews.com. Brought to you today by North Park Mazda, the #1 Mazda dealer in Texas last month. For expressnews.com, I'm Chance Dorland.